Welcome to the Brahma Kumaris Raj Yoga Meditation course. Session 4, the Supreme Soul. As usual, we'll start with meditation. So sit very comfortably, sit relaxed. Just become the observer of your thoughts. And just create a new thought. I am a peaceful being. I am a peaceful soul. I'm a tiny star, sparkling in the center of this forehead. This is my natural form, an embodiment of peace. This is who I am, tiny star. Om Shanti. In our first 3 sessions, we looked at the identity of the self. I am a soul. And we looked at how the soul functions. The soul has mind, intellect, and sanskars. And its sanskars are constantly being shaped according to circumstances, according to people, according to the influences in its life. But when we sit in the awareness, I am a soul, we reconnect with our original sanskars and we become the embodiment of that. Then we looked at the aspect of the philosophy of actions, the law of karma. For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And that each soul is responsible for its own actions. It experiences the return of that action. So whatever is happening in today's world is the result of the soul's past karma. So each soul is at the right place at the right time, with the right situation, right people, right circumstances, because they had created that through their past actions. But we can change the future through understanding by shifting our consciousness that I'm a soul. However, we also need a little bit of outside intervention. And in this session, we're going to look at the aspect of the Supreme Soul. Now, what is your impression of God? What is your thinking of God? Most people see God in the form of a physical being. Sometimes people say that God created man in his own image, so therefore they are searching God at that level. One thing I do know, however you see God, is that sooner or later people turn to God. And most people turn to God at time of sorrow. In today's world, even God, the topic God, can be divisive, but actually we need to have some understanding who or what God is. God is not a divisive figure. God is a very loving, very kind figure. But to understand God, we have to understand ourselves. Just as the physical body has a physical father, the soul also has a spiritual father. So we have 2 fathers, a physical father and a spiritual father. It is this spiritual father that is remembered as God. Just as I am a point of light, a soul, Atma, God is also a point of light, a soul. But this soul is the Supreme Soul. Now, we need to understand who or what this Supreme Soul is, because many things have been written about God through different scriptures, through different religions. But God has to be universally accepted by all, irrespective of religion, irrespective of culture. So God is just like you and I. God is just a point of light. Just as you are a point of light, God is also a point of light. But there are a few differences. So in order to understand God and what are the differences, we need to understand a few things. So let's say you have a new colleague at work, or a new member of the family, or a new neighbour. What are the things that you would like to know about them in order to understand them better? Maybe it's their job, maybe it's their relationships, their possessions, their position. Maybe it's their home, their personality. Perhaps you would want to know the name that they are referred by, how to connect. In the same way, if we apply those same principles to God, hopefully we should have a better understanding. So God is an important part of Raj Yoga, because ultimately we are going to realize that without God, we will not be able to transform our lives. So I need to understand God. I know God is a point of light, and there is only one God. There's not two or three. He doesn't have a father or a mother. He is always a point of light. So let's look at the aspects of roles. Well, you're an actor. I'm an actor. We play many roles throughout the day. And God is also an actor. Now, in our relationships, we have different relationships with different people because each of those relationships gives us a different experience. So the role of a mother gives us a different relationship and experience to that of a father. Maybe we don't want to speak to our family. We would talk to a friend. Maybe we'll talk to a total stranger. So in our lives, each relationship gives us an experience which we feel that's missing. And if that relationship is missing, we try to fill that with someone else. In the same way, God is also an actor. Like you and I, plays many roles. So he can play the role of a mother, a father, can play the role of a teacher, a Satguru. Now, this word guru has become very fashionable in the West now. It's sort of crossed over from India to the West. So what does a guru mean? Well, the word guru comes from the word Sanskrit word. It's made of two words, gu-ru. Gu means darkness, ru means light. So a guru is one who takes you, who guides you from darkness into enlightenment. So this world is full of gurus. We have fashion gurus, we have political gurus, we have health gurus, we have cooking gurus, we have science gurus. There is a guru for every sector in this world. But this one is the true guru. Sat means true. So this is the true guide. He can play the role of a friend. He can play the role of a companion, a doctor, a grandmother, a child. Ever see God as your child? Well, you need to explore that relationship. Because when you become a child of God, you surrender everything to God. And in return, God becomes our child because he surrenders himself to us. Now, God is not male or female. The soul is never male or female. But it is in the role that God plays that he's known as the he. So he plays the principal role of the father, the one who protects, the one who gives the inheritance. And it is always the son that receives the inheritance. So in that context, God is male and the soul is also male. But when the soul enters a physical body, it depends whether it's a male or female. Accordingly, the soul will be either a male or female. So he can play many roles. Now, as I said, in a worldly life, we have so many relationships. And we're surrounded by relationships. And once that relationship is missing, there's a void. And so we try to fill that void with another relationship. But the problem with that is that we will continuously be dependent on the outside world. So the more relationships I have, the more complex it becomes. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not there. I mean, think about your friends, think about the ones that you trust. Maybe you call upon them for help, assistance, in the odd hours of the morning. Now, once, they can perhaps cope with it. Twice, maybe, yes. But if you keep contacting them, they will soon get annoyed. They will say, will you sort yourself out? So we can see on a physical level, these relationships have limitations. But what if we have all relationships with this one being, this supreme soul? Then I can experience all that relationship in this one being who is always there constantly for me for 24/7. Therefore, I can have relationship with others based on equality, not based on taking. So when I have a relationship with God, my relationship is full in that he sees me as his equal and I see him as my equal. And on that basis, we have a loving relationship. And therefore, irrespective whether I have a relationship with the outside world or not, makes no difference to how I feel, because my relationship is with the Supreme Being. So what about God's qualities? How much love does he have? How much happiness does he have? Does it ever run out? No. He's unlimited. He is truth. He is love. He is peace. He's like an ocean. Like an ocean, it's unlimited. So he is the ocean of knowledge, the ocean of purity, the almighty authority. Now, do you think when people go to places of worship and they praise God and say, God, thank you for this child, thank you for this job, thank you for this circumstance, do you think God becomes even happier? If somebody praised you, how would you feel? Would you feel happier? Of course you would. And then tomorrow, that same person insults you. How would you then feel? Would you still feel happy? Probably not. So if tomorrow you start cursing God, thank you, God, for this mess you've got me into. Thank you for this relationship. Thank you for this job, sarcastically. Do you think God's happiness comes down? I don't think so. God is a flatliner. His happiness is always constant. So he is beyond praise and defamation. You cannot corrupt God through praise or defamation. You can't buy God's favor. He is always loving. Now, he only has virtues. He only has truth. There is no anger in God. He has no vices. So therefore, God will never see any vices in others. God will never get angry with anyone, unhappy with anyone, because he's the embodiment of all virtues. This is why he's known as the almighty authority. He is experienced in all might. So he seems a nice person. That it's a person that I would like to have in my life. Do you have someone like that in your life? Maybe they're sometimes, but they're not all the time. But with the Supreme Soul, with the Divine, with God, he is that constantly and continuously in an unlimited way. Well, can't keep calling God, God, can we? We need a name. Now, when I came over to this country at the age of 6 from Punjab, India, I was given the name Paramjit. And somehow in the translation, it became Palmjit. So soon people called me my many different names because they couldn't pronounce my name. And each time they would pronounce it differently, and so they would spell it differently. And all of a sudden, I had so many names. So some people eventually came to know me as Paramjit. Some people called me Palmjit. On my passport, it's actually spelled Palmjit. But that's the name that is stuck. Now, if you were talking about me, if someone was calling me Parmjit and someone was calling me Paramjit, and if they met together, do you think they would be talking about the same individual? Or would they be thinking that there's two people here? But only I know that they are talking about me. So I want to tell you a story about my friend John. Now, John went on a tour of Europe once, and he left Leicester, wonderful city here in the UK, and he decides to go to Ireland. And he likes the country so much, he decides to adopt the Irish name for John. Do you know what the Irish name for John is? It is Sean, S-E-A-N, Sean. Sean is the Irish name for John. And then Sean leaves Ireland and goes to Spain. And again he resides there and adopts the Spanish name for John. And the Spanish name for John is Juan. Now Juan has had a wonderful time. And then again it's time to move on. He goes to France. And what does Juan become? He becomes Jean. And then, having explored France, he then moves to Holland. And Jean becomes Jan. And then Jan leaves Holland and goes to Sweden. And what does Jan become? Johan. And then he moves to Scotland. What is the Scottish name for John? It's Ian. Ian is the Scottish name for John. And Ian comes back to Leicester and he completes his tour and he reverts back to the name John. Now, which is the correct name for John? Is it Ian, Jan, Sean, Juan, Jean, or John? They're all correct. It depends where you live. Now, if you're in Spain, you're hardly going to call your child Johan. It's going to be Juan. If you're in England, it's going to be John. It's not going to be any other name. So in the same way, God has also been given many names. So what are some of the names that God is known by? The Muslims have over 700 names for him. But the most popular is Allah, Khuda. The Jews call him Yahweh, Prabhu, Ishwar, Shiva, Bolinath. In fact, there are as many names for God as there are languages in the world. And in that too, the name means something. It is a role that God plays. So in this country, many years ago, people only had the one name. They would all be known by their first name. So let's say in those old times, you went to the village and you said, I would like to speak to John, please. Then suddenly 10 different Johns would come out. And now, how do you know which one? So they would say, well, I want to speak to John, who is the barrel maker, who makes barrel. So his name became John Cooper. So the word Cooper is the surname, which means a barrel maker. Now, I don't want the barrel maker. I want the one who makes arrows. So he would become Fletcher, John Fletcher. So all of our names have some origin with some act or some place or some quality. In the same way, God has many names. So which is the correct name for God? Is it Allah? Is it Jehovah? Is it Shiva? Well, again, it depends where you are. If you're in a Muslim country, it's highly unlikely that you're going to call God Yahweh. If you're a Christian, you're not going to call God Allah. So it depends where you are. But just as I am known by many different names, and my mum calls me by a different name to what Dad calls me by, but I know it's my name. So we are also calling God by a name that we feel very comfortable with. And whichever name we call God by, it's fine. Just as people call me Paramjit, Parmjit, It doesn't matter, because I know they are referring to me. They're talking about me. It's just a name. It is strange. I was given this name. I didn't choose it. I didn't choose this name. It was already given to me by my parents. It's almost like that is what my parents wanted for me. But if I had the choice, I wonder what name I would have chosen. But I'm happy with this name, and I'll stick with it, because I also understand what it means, and I'm quite intoxicated by that meaning. It means supremely victorious. So in the same way, whatever name we call God, it's fine. In fact, I call God by a name that's not even mentioned on that list. It's Baba. B-A-B-A. I feel very comfortable calling God Baba, because it's not a formal name. It's very informal. It's rather like you don't call your father, father, you say dad. Well, I call my dad anyway, dad. In the same way, it's like calling God dad. Hey, Baba. So Baba is my preferred name for God. And when I use the word Baba, I use it in the form of a relationship, as a father and the child, as a friend, as a companion. So whichever name you call God by, it's fine. So let's not lose sleep over a name. But I have a feeling, if he were to apply for a role, a job in this world, he would only write his true name. So perhaps, just as you and I only have one official name, he also has a one official name. And what that name is, well, you decide. So, now I know that God is an actor, plays many roles. He can be my companion, he can be my friend, he can be my teacher, he can be my mother, my father, he can be my grandchild, my child. He can play any role that I wish. And he has wonderful qualities. He is full of love. He is full of peace. He's full of happiness. He's full of purity. There's no trace of sorrow. There's no trace of vice. And he has many names. So it's okay. Seems like this person is a very nice being. So where does this being live? Just as if you wanted to know about a new friend or a new family member or work colleague, perhaps you would ask them the question, where do you live? So where does God live? I know you're saying he lives everywhere. He's omnipresent. Is he? Let's explore some misunderstandings we have about God. Well, just like the sun, the light of the sun goes everywhere, but the sun is not everywhere. Just as the sound from a transmitter, whether it's a TV transmitter or a radio transmitter, the energy goes everywhere, but the source is just one. In the same way, God is also a transmitter, also stays in one place. His energy goes everywhere, but like the sun, he is just in a place. So God is not omnipresent. If we say that God is omnipresent, everything that we do contradicts this aspect of being omnipresent. So if he's everywhere, why do I need to go to a place of worship? Can I not just stay at home and worship God from there? Can I not pray to God just from there? Or do I have to be in a place of worship? Is he more present there than he is here? And if I go to a place of worship, often we will, out of respect, wash our feet, wash our hands before we enter a place of worship. We will perhaps cover our heads, remove our shoes. So it is a sign of respect. But if God is everywhere, then why do we disrespect God by walking on him with our dirty shoes? Is he in the dirt? Is he in the rubbish? Of course not. And yet we say omnipresent. Omnipresent means everywhere. Omni, every. So if there's a insect crawling up your leg, what do? Yes, you flick it. You may even kill it. Did you flick God? Did you kill God? Did you really kill God? Well, according to the ones who say he's omnipresent, then you definitely killed God. But I don't think you killed God. You killed an insect. So God is not omnipresent. God is not everywhere. In fact, when people say, where is God? They normally point upwards. So if he's upwards, it means he's not down here. Now, if you think about this, this makes completely sense when we realize that God is not omnipresent. Yes, he's omnipotent. He's very powerful in all aspects. So if I went to a hot country, I go to India normally every year, but on this occasion, for circumstances, I couldn't go. Now, if I go to that hot country, I will experience the heat. And when I come back from the hot country into this cold country, in relative terms, I would feel the cold. Because in India, the heat is everywhere. And in the UK, the cold is everywhere. In the same way, if God, who is the ocean of love, who is the ocean of peace, who is the ocean of happiness, what should I experience? I should experience all of those things. So where does God live then? Well, it's very simple. He lives outside of this physical universe. If you can imagine that your screen represents the entire universe, but what's beyond your screen? Does the world not exist beyond that? Is there another dimension? Is there another space? Yes. This universe, which we measure in light years, and a distance a light year is literally a distance that a light travels in 1 year. So I think the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. So if you times that by 60 seconds, times that by 60 minutes, times that by 24 hours, times that by 365, you'll get the distance that light travels in 1 year. So it's a long distance, it's huge. But even though it's huge, it is not finite. It is an infinite world. It is a finite world, rather. It is not infinite. So what's beyond the physical universe? Well, it must be a non-physical world. If this is a physical world where there is time, sound, noise, actions, then in the same way, that world is outside of the physical world, which does not have time, does not have sound, does not have actions. So that world would be constantly very still, silent. Nothing changes. And it is that world that is remembered as God's home. And we remember it through different names. Just as God has many names, in the same way, this world of silence has many names. Brahmand, Paramdham, Brahmlok, Nirvana, Shantidham, incorporeal world, the soul world. It is this world, a world of continuous self-luminous light, a world of silence, is where God resides. Not only does God reside there, but you and I have also originally come from that world of silence. It is the world of souls. And in this world, there is no sound, there is no time. It is an infinite world of silence and peace and purity. Here the soul is sitting in its latent form. It's almost, you could say, dormant form. It is here where God resides. It is the incorporeal home. So if God resides in this world of silence that is beyond the physical universe, how do we make that connection? It's like you have a friend and you want to contact them. You know that they live some distance away from you. How do you make the connection? Well, perhaps you may do it through the internet or through your mobile phone, but you definitely make a connection. In the same way, we can also connect with God. We can also make that connection. Now, in this little slide that you see in front of you, it shows electrical cables. On one side, the insulation has been removed. On the other side, the insulation is still there. So even though you can connect the two cables together, but because the other side still has insulation, no electricity will flow through. The connection will not be made. So what do? We remove the insulation from the other cable, and only then the copper will be connected to the copper and electricity will flow through. In the same way, what stops us from connecting God is us. Because we see ourselves in body consciousness, we see ourselves as a physical body, then what happens is, it is the insulation that's stopping us from connecting with the Supreme Soul. Rather like I'm tuned into AM signals and the transmitter is in FM signal. Now, no matter how hard I try, I can never pick up that FM signal as long as I'm tuned into AM frequency. Now, I know the transmitter's not going to change. So what has to change? It's the receiver. The receiver has to switch to FM mode. In the same way, God is always soul conscious. God is always a point of light. But what happens with us is that we switch from soul consciousness into body conscious. So God is soul conscious FM and we're in body conscious AM. So no matter how hard we try, we will never make the connection. So it's not that God is going to switch his awareness to our level. No, we have to remove the insulation and only then can we make the connection. So what is the benefit of that connection? I want you to think of someone in your life who's very miserable. He's always angry, very sensitive. How do you feel when you remember that individual? Do you feel happy? Or do you also feel what they feel? Now, I want you to remember someone who's very happy. When they walk through that door, they uplift the whole room. How do you feel now? Of course, you feel happy. You feel uplifted yourself. So we're colored by the company we keep. In the same way, when we connect with God, we also are colored by his company. And his company is love, peace, purity, bliss, truth, powers. And so by connecting with God, it's like the plug, the battery is charged to the mains. And instantly there is power received. Now, as you know, given the analogy of a battery, if your phone's battery has been discharged, will the mains come to the phone? Or does the phone have to go to the mains? You have to plug to the mains. And then once it's plugged in, the battery will take whatever it needs. The mains will never run out of power. In the same way, when we connect with God, we will take power from God. We will be filled by whatever he has. So he is knowledge, powers, and virtues. So we will be filled with those three. And as we connect more and more with him, we receive more and more power. Just as when you connect your discharged battery to the mains, it doesn't instantly recharge. It takes time to recharge. So the longer you maintain that connection, the more the battery will attain that power. In the same way, the more we remember God, the more power we'll receive. Now we need to understand how karma plays into this. Now we understand the law of karma. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Now if I don't remember God, God is not going to remember me, just as the main is not going to connect to the phone. So I have to connect with God. Now, when I connect with God, God has to connect with me. Here is how karma works. According to the law of karma, whatever I give, I receive. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So when I connect with God, God has to connect with me. If I disconnect from God, God disconnects from me. But we have to be at his level, at his frequency, at his consciousness. So the more we connect with God, the more power we receive. And through that connection, we take power. That power gives us the spiritual resources to cope with our karmic bondages. Just as I gave the example in the philosophy of karma, if someone's outgoings exceed their incomings, then debt will continue to rise. But what if one day they win the lottery, the big one? Are they worried about their debts now? No. The debt can be paid in full, but there's no pain in paying that debt. Why? Because they have the financial means, whereas before they didn't have the financial means. In the same way, when I connect with God, I receive the spiritual lottery. I receive the spiritual resources that allows me to cope with the indifference that's out there in my life. It allows me to settle my karma without the suffering of karma. So the fastest way of settling karma without the suffering of karma is to remember God. This is why throughout different religions it is remembered that if you remember God, then your sins are absolved. So this is the meaning of that, is that when we connect with God, we receive power, and that power allows us to settle our karma. It's not that God writes that debt off 100%, no. However, when we remember God, God also displays his merciful side. And the way he does that is that the more we remember him, the more he reduces the karmic debt. Think of it this way. Let's say you bought an item from a shop and you paid full price, only to discover the next day that same item was reduced in a sale to 50%. So your pound, your currency, could have gone twice as far. In the same way, when we remember God, we receive the currency of spiritual powers, and God also reduces the price on that debt. So in effect, half of that karmic account is reduced. So the more we remember him, the more we have a relationship with him, the more we're settling our karma without the suffering of karma. So yoga is the way to connect with God. And when we connect with God, we become like God. Not God. We become like God. God is God. But we can become godlike in our character, in our behavior. Because after all, I'm a soul, and God is also a soul, a point of light. So this connection can only be attained when I let go of the physical consciousness of this body, when I let go of the roles that I'm attached to, when I detach myself from all of those and I become a point of light, a soul conscious stage, then I can connect with God. And then, like the cables, power will flow through. And so the more I remember my Baba, my Allah, my Jehovah, whatever name you feel comfortable with, then that is what you will receive. So in the same way, we all have an opportunity to remember God. Anyone can connect with God. You don't have to be practicing Raj Yoga or following a religion or didn't follow a religion. The moment you let go of your consciousness, I am the body and I am a soul, then I will make the connection. So, how does God see me? Well, God sees me as he sees himself. He sees me with the utmost respect. He sees me with love. He doesn't see my weaknesses. You know, when we look at others, what do we see? Do we see their defects? Do we criticize them? Do we insult them? Do we make flippant comments? Well, God doesn't do that. He would only see us in our purest form. He would only see us as tiny stars, as souls, as he sees himself. So when we connect with God, we also see ourselves in that same consciousness, but also we look at others in that same awareness that everyone is a child of the Supreme. Therefore, that makes us one big spiritual family who has only one spiritual father, one spiritual mother. This soul, this Supreme Soul, plays the role of both, the mother and the father. So, what makes God God? Why can't you be God? Why is he the Supreme? Why is he ever pure? Why is he the ocean of love? Again, we need to apply some simple logics to this. Now, as I said, God lives in this incorporeal world. So he lives outside of the physical world. Now, we live in the UK, for example, and if we went to France, we are bound by the laws of that land. So in this country, we drive on the left-hand side of the road. But in France, they drive on the right-hand side of the road. Now, even though we drive on the left-hand side, we cannot go to France and say, well, I'm going to drive on the left-hand side of the road, because that is not the law. So we're bound by the laws of that particular country. In the same way, when the soul that's in the soul world, it is bound by the laws of the soul world. There's no change. It's just silent. It's ever peaceful, ever pure. But when the soul comes into the physical world, it is also bound by the laws of the physical world. And one of the laws is the laws of entropy, or the laws of change. The moment the soul comes into this physical birth, it will start losing its power. It is gradual to begin with, and then it will accelerate as time progresses. But what if you never came into this cycle of birth and rebirth? Then the soul wouldn't lose its power. Just like if you bought a battery from a shop and you never opened it from its wrapping, you assume that the power would still be 100%, the battery would be fully charged. But if you take the battery out of the wrapping and you put it into your gadget, then what happens? It loses power. So in the same way, God is the powerhouse that never comes into the cycle and birth and rebirth, and so therefore never becomes body conscious. So what makes God unique amongst all souls is that whereas we, the soul, come into the cycle of birth and rebirth and eventually go from a stage of complete purity to impurity, God stays outside of the cycle of birth and rebirth, and so therefore never becomes discharged of his purity. So this is the one being. There's always a point of light. So with that definition, no human being, no subtle being can be God. Now I know in some cultures they say God incarnates in this, in that. But if you say that that is God, then followers of another religion would not buy into that. So if you see God as a physical being, God will be accepted by some and not by others. God has to be universally accepted by all. So God is a point of light. God is a tiny star. And there's one thing I do know, is that every religion has always said God is light. Well, he is light. He's a point of light. And God never comes into the cycle of birth and rebirth, and so will always be a point of light. Now, when I say God, and let me give you the introduction of God. Here we are. This image shows you the image of God. This is what God looks like. He hasn't 1,000 arms. He hasn't got a face or a head. He's just a star. He's just light. He's a tiny point of light. And so God is a point of light. And when I say God is a point of light, then every religion will accept truly that this is God. Because God has to be universally accepted, because God is inclusive, is not exclusive. God would embrace souls of all religions. So what makes God unique? Well, he's ever pure, ever peaceful, ever knowledgeful. He is outside of the cycle of birth and rebirth. He would never have his own body. He would never take birth through the womb. He is always incorporeal, and he's always the almighty authority. So when I have the consciousness that God is just like me, and I apply some simple understandings, then I realize actually God is very simple to understand, very simple to realize, and very simple to connect with. In this last few moments, we're going to practice this. Okay. So let's see if we can connect with God. Anyone can do it, as I said. And you'll know when you've connected with God. You'll feel that power. You feel that, yeah, this feels something special. So once again, sit very comfortably, sit relaxed. Just relax your body. Just visualize yourself as a tiny point of light, sitting in the center of the forehead. I am a soul seated in the center of this forehead, sitting on my throne of self-respect. I am the master of this body, and I am wearing this costume, the body. I, the soul, have incarnated into this physical body, and now I let go of this body. I let go of the throne in the center of the forehead, and I, the soul, a point of light, gently float upwards. I let go of the costume. I fly beyond the room, beyond the building. I fly higher and higher. I fly through the clouds, the sky. I go beyond the pool of this globe. And I, the soul, a tiny star, a living rocket, go past the moon, the planets, the sun, and I keep on flying. I fly beyond those stars, and I leave this world of silence and enter a world of dead silence, a self-luminous world of red light. Here there is no sound, there is no actions, there is nothing physical. It is another dimension, a dimension of peace. This is my home, my eternal home of rest. I, the soul, sit in this world of silence. And in this world of self-luminous red light is another light, a pure white light. And I am drawn to this light, for this is the ocean of knowledge, the ocean of peace. This is the Supreme Father, the Supreme Soul of all. And I have come to the shores of the ocean, and I experience the waves from the ocean of love. Waves of love that are unconditional, unlimited. And I sit with the divine. I take power from the highest on high. I claim my inheritance and blessings from the divine. He accepts me as I am, what I am. There are no conditions attached. I sit as a child would sit in the lap of his father. And I feel light. It is as though my Father has removed my bondages, my burdens. And now I take leave from the shores of the ocean. I, the soul, fly away. I leave the world of silence and come back into the world of sound. I'm such a fast rocket. I fly past those stars, the sun and the planets. And I come down into this planet, through the sky and the clouds. I can see the building that I came from. I come down into the room, and I see my costume, the body. I enter this costume, and once more I sit on my throne of self-respect in the center of this forehead. Om Shanti. So the more I bring God into my awareness, into my relationship, the more I will be free from the bondages of that world that's trapped me in sorrow. So by having a connection with God, I will have a soul-conscious relationship with everyone out there, not on the basis of a bondage. So I need to practice this relationship. And it is a relationship that I need to forge with the divine. It is not that I'm worshipping God. I'm becoming like God by seeing Him as my friend, my companion. You know, if we want to get close to someone, we have to have a relationship. And God doesn't want us to worship Him. He wants us to become like Him. And I can only do that if I have a relationship that is meaningful and it's done with understanding. So in the next session, in session number 5, we will look at spiritual powers that we need to experience peace, happiness, contentment, and how we can use these powers in a practical way. So we hope to see you once more in the next session. Om Shanti. Welcome to the Brahma Kumaris Raj Yoga Meditation Course, Session 5, 8 Powers. But before we start the session, as always, we should start with silence. So sit very comfortably, sit relaxed. Just come into the awareness, I am a point of light, a being of peace. I sit here peacefully in the center of this forehead, seated on my throne of self-respect. I've let go of the influences in my life. I freed myself from the bondages of life. I just hold on to the awareness. I am a point of light, a being of light. I am a powerful soul who has the power to rule over the self. I am unshakable, fearless, courageous. Om Shanti. So we have covered 2 key sessions, the soul and the Supreme Soul. I would say the essence of Raj Yoga is about a relationship with the soul and the Supreme Soul. So when I connect with the divine, this supreme light, a soul that's just like me, but who remains outside of the cycle of birth and rebirth. And through that connection, I receive power. Power that enables me to cope with the ups and downs of life. Whatever life can throw at me, I will have the resources. And he specifically gives us 8 spiritual powers. Now, these are the powers that allow us to remain peaceful, allow us to remain happy and content, to live in the present. So in front of you are these 8 images. It's like a lotus flower. And each of this image represents a particular power. Now we're going to start off with the tortoise. And the tortoise represents the power to withdraw. Now think about when a tortoise is attacked. What does it do? It withdraws itself into the limb. And when it withdraws itself into the limb, then no predator can attack it. It's safe in its own strong shell. In the same way, do I have the ability to withdraw when I'm under attack through words, through deeds, through thoughts? So the power to withdraw is really about going beyond the influences of the past, going beyond the influences of others, of situations, of people. So the more withdrawn I am, the securer I become. So in a situation where everyone is trying to manipulate me, influence me, and this causes confusion, this causes doubt. This causes cloudiness in my judgment, in my thinking. But at that moment, what I need is not to get caught up in the outside world, is I need to go into this inner world of silence. So this power to withdraw is really about sitting in that inner world of silence where nothing can disturb me. So I become like a fortress of peace. And the more I stay in this fortress of peace, the more I'm free from any forms of influence. And influences can come in a good way as well. Of course, we need to take the positives out of any positive influence, but nevertheless, it shouldn't become a dependency. And this means that my happiness cannot be taken away from others because I know it comes from within, because I'm withdrawn from the outside world. It doesn't mean I'm disconnected from the outside world. No, it means I'm no longer influenced by that world. So yes, I can have a person in front of me. They can be quite abrasive, they can be quite angry, but if I'm out in that world, then I'm going to be affected by that. But in that situation, I need to withdraw, I need to go inwards. So they're outside. So it's almost like I'm listening, but not hearing. I'm seeing, but not seeing. So it's this ability to go beyond the influence of circumstances, possessions, comments, criticism, insults. I'm just sitting in this world of silence. And this is the power to withdraw. Now, the next power is the power to pack up. Now you see this massive suitcase. Now, if you've ever been to India, and you have to go. If you haven't been to India, it's a great place to visit. Love the culture, love the Indians, especially being an Indian myself. So what they do over there is they take these massive metal trunks, and it's almost like their whole life is in that trunk. And this really represents the power to pack up. This is the ability to let go. So can I pack up all the things of the past, all the things that are troubling me? Can I just put it in this little trunk or big trunk and then just put a padlock, just lock it and then throw the key away and I say, Om Shanti, it's finished? Or do I hang on to it? Because in today's world, people are always holding on to the past. And the more we hold on to it, the more we feel insecure, the more we experience suffering inside, the more sorrow we experience. So it's good if we can let go. Now, it doesn't mean I forget the past. It means I'm stuck in the past. I'm no longer influenced by the past. Of course, the past is the past. But I shouldn't be stuck in the past. Most people, if you talk to them, they're always talking about their past. I should have done this, I should have done that. Why did so-and-so behave like that? I didn't deserve this. And so what happens is they hold on to those thoughts. They latch on to those situations, those comments, those relationships that have gone pear-shaped, and then they're adding more and more. They're accumulating so much baggage. What we should be doing is just putting a full stop and just letting it go. Now, how heavy is this glass of water? Well, it depends. In terms of mass, it's not going to increase or decrease irrespective of time. But if I hold that glass of water for just 1 second and then I put it down, how heavy is it? It's insignificant. It's not heavy at all. But what if I hold on to that glass? I just hold it for hours upon hours. Then the weight increases. I become tired and eventually I will have to put the glass down. So what do? Do we pick up that situation and then let it go? Or do we hold on to it for the rest of our lives? Because that's what most people do. And when we're holding on to these situations, it's very difficult to have closure. So as in my example demonstrated, I was holding on to, why did the business close? It should have been like this, it should have been like that. But the problem was, I hadn't let go. I didn't want to learn the lessons. I was just blaming. This should have happened, that should have happened. It was like I was in a state of denial. And I couldn't put a full stop. I couldn't have closure. But if I had the power to pack up, I could let go. Now, the power to pack up doesn't mean just about what happened yesterday or yesteryears. It's about what happened 1 second ago. The moment I put a full stop, whatever was said, whatever I said, whatever was spoken to me, it's finished. I can't change it. I can do nothing but accept. For me, the power to pack up is the power to accept. I've accepted it. And because I've accepted it, I've let go. If I can't accept the situation, if I can't accept that relationship that's causing me turmoil, then it means I'm going to experience burden. So I will relive the event over and over again in my mind. And so I will experience the negative emotions that are carried with that situation, that incident, that individual. And not only I don't pack up, if there are other people in my life from the past, I don't allow them to move on. I hold them back. Because every time I see that individual or that situation, it will remind me of that. Oh, you said this to me. I didn't deserve what you said to me. This situation was like that. It shouldn't have happened. But what I'm doing is I'm reminding them. I'm reminding that possession that you had the power to rule over me. And therefore, because I couldn't accept it, I couldn't accept what has happened, I'm still trying to shift the blame onto others. So I can't pack up. I can't put a full stop. I can't let go. So the more I become trapped in the past, the more difficult it is to let go, the more difficult it is to pack up. For myself, we had a building in the city centre, and I would avoid that place. Because every time I went near that place, it would instantly start a reaction inside. And it reminded me of what could have been. And then one day, I had that sufficient power, that inner power, that reserve of power that allowed me to go past that building, and no more did that building have a hold over me. It was like I had moved on. I had let go. So this power to pack up is the ability to live in the present, not stuck in the past, not thinking about the future. It's this ability to accept whatever's happened was for my benefit. And it has been for my benefit. I know, had the business not failed, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. Because the person that I am today is very happy. It's very gentle. It's very kind. It has a lot more empathy for others. I'm able to appreciate the small things in my life, whereas before I didn't appreciate it. So the situation that brought me here at the time was giving me sorrow. But now I look back and I'm thinking, wow, I'm really glad that happened. Because it showed me another side. A side that was much gentler. A side that was much more compassionate and merciful. A side that was always wanting to reveal itself, but I suppressed it because I was busy chasing things on the outside. But now, I've let go. And because I've let go, I can look back at the past without any fear. There's no feelings. So I can go past that building. It has no feelings towards me. It's the past is the past. So how strong are you in putting a full stop? Or is it an exclamation mark, a comma, or a question mark? Because that implies there's more to come. Don't. Let it go. Let's move on. And let's move on to the next power. So here in the next one is this boy throwing stones at the mango tree. And of course, if you've been to India, there's loads of mango trees, especially when in season. It's great. Now, this represents the power to tolerate. When the boy is throwing things at the tree, does the tree hurl the stones back at the boy? No. It bends down. It gives its fruit. It's actually giving, whereas the boy is throwing. So this power of tolerance is sadly lacking in today's world. We have become very intolerant of each other. We cannot tolerate somebody's belief systems, the way they dress, their language, their culture. We cannot tolerate our neighbors. We cannot tolerate even our family. I mean, I know when I was young, I tell you, my dad used to annoy me because he was always slurping when he was taking soup, when he was eating soup. And there are a few things that really used to sort of wind me up, with people opening with their mouths open. I didn't like that. So it demonstrated that I didn't have the power to tolerate. So I was easily affected by what others say. And you know, like the boy throwing things, when you don't have the power to tolerate, you react. There's a knee-jerk reaction. So I would tell my dad, and you know, it doesn't matter what I said, my dad didn't change, and still to this day, he slurps his food when he eats soup. But there's a big difference. I'm no longer affected by that. I've seemed to have conquered that particular part. And nor does it affect me when people eat with their mouths open. That's their choice. See, the wonderful thing about tolerance is that when you have that power, you can accept everyone. It doesn't matter what their background is, or how their personality is like, is that you accept. And this is tolerance. When I'm tolerant with myself, then I can reveal my gentler side. Now, it's easy to say I'm very gentle, very sweet, and very kind. But can I be all of that if I don't have tolerance power? Of course not. I'm going to get angry. I'm going to get upset. I'm going to hurl back stones at them because it's a tit for tat. It's reaction, reaction. And then the situation escalates. So sadly in this world, we see that not only in the home, we see that in the community, we see it within countries, we see it with different nationalities, and inevitably, because of this lack of power to tolerate, you can see conflict arises. But when you can tolerate, you diffuse the situation. You find solutions, you find resolutions rather than you looking at the problem. So it's about solution focus rather than problem focus. So it's very important to increase the power of tolerance. So the more tolerance I have, the more I will enjoy life. So I can tolerate crazy drivers on the road. I don't get into a sort of race with them. That time is gone. Maybe it's age. But nevertheless, I know it's actually my own work on the self that has allowed me to expand my tolerance power. Have I reached my limits? No. I think there are times when I know I can be a little bit intolerant. So it means there's a little bit of homework to do. But nevertheless, from where I was and where I am, I have come a huge distance. And there's a lot more to do as well. But that applies to everyone who's working on themselves. It does take effort to remove the most stubborn of all personality traits. So this power of tolerance is the ability to accept everything and everyone. There's no comments. I'm not going to make comments about this and that. You know, I used to be very sarcastic at times, but now I've learnt even that gives sorrow. So now I can tolerate. So the way people behave, it's okay. It's like, yeah, I accept it. What's the problem? And because I'm accepting it, I'm also diffusing the situation. It never escalates. So I don't point out people's peculiarities Because each one has a right. Just as I have a right to be, they have a right to be as well. And that is a sign of tolerance, is when you can live and let live. The next power is the power to adjust. Now here is the river meandering, and eventually it goes to the sea, the ocean. Now what happens when there's an obstacle in front of fast-moving water? Does it try to break the obstacle, or does it just go around it? Does it adjust itself? So this is the power to adjust. This really represents, how flexible am I? Do I have the ability to mold to situations, to people, different personality traits? Or am I stubborn? Am I rigid? Am I the one that wants everyone else to conform to my way of thinking and doing? Well, if I do, then I have no flexibility whatsoever. There is no adjustment power. So this ability to adjust allows me to be wherever I am, and I'm comfortable with that. Because we have the power of adjustment. Because we have to adjust according to the seasons. So if it's hot out there, you wouldn't wear hot clothes. You'd wear light clothes. But equally, if it's cold, you change accordingly and you wear clothes that will keep you warm. So it's not that others have to adjust to me. It's not that the weather has to adjust to my clothing. It's the other way around. So the power of adjustment is me molding myself, adjusting myself to the situation, to the circumstances, to the individual. So the more I'm able to mold myself, the more flexible I am. It's like the elastic. Now, I'm not going to snap, because I'm like a spiritual elastic. Yes, I know my elasticity is increasing. As I said, it's very much linked to the previous power, the tolerance power. So when I have the ability to apply the power of adjustment, I can mold myself to people. So I know that with some people, you have to be very direct. But that doesn't imply that I have to adopt that direct approach with everyone, because not everyone can take that type of communication. Some people are very sensitive. Some people are very delicate. So what do we have to do? We also have to mold ourselves. We have to be a bit more tactile. We need to be diplomatic. We need to be careful in our words that we speak, with our body language. So it's taking into account of the other person. So there are times when you don't have to say anything because they don't want to hear anything. Sometimes it's just your vibrations that will do the work. So this ability to mold yourself in the situation gives us great flexibility, and we can be comfortable wherever we are. Now, I know in my travels, I have traveled to places where it doesn't have that comfortable bed that I'm used to at home. It doesn't have that luxurious mattress that I'm used to at home. So I remember once going to Delhi for the first time, to a Brahma Kumaris Center, and it was the staging point where all the foreigners would come from abroad, and they would go to this particular center. And the first thing you want to do is you have a shower and then rest, because it's been a long, hard travel. And so what happened, I was shown to this dormitory, and there was this bed, and it looked very comfortable. So I thought, yeah, that's great. That's just what I... So I had my shower, got rid of all this sweat and the smell, and I put on some loose clothing, and then I thought, okay, let me just lie down. I just quickly ran there, and I just crashed back. And what was it? It was just a plywood sheet. It was rock hard. I banged my head on it. Now, on the outside, it looked very comfortable, but actually it was just a sheeting. It was an illusion that it gave me the impression that it was a nice mattress, but actually it was just hardboard, as I said, a plywood sheet. And I banged my head. Now, do I start complaining? Do I start complaining? I've come all this way. Why am I not given a comfortable bed? No. I've got to adjust myself to the situation. I'm just grateful that I've actually got a place to rest. And so this ability to mold myself to the situation has really helped me to breeze myself through life rather than becoming stuck. So yes, I did bang my head for a while, but I learned a valuable lesson again, that sometimes I need to check the firmness, see if it's appropriate. So this ability to mold yourself is really this flexibility. How flexible am I to mold myself to situations, to individuals, to circumstances? So I also have to mold myself with myself. I have to adjust to my own selves. Because what happens is, when I'm transforming myself, some of my old son scars will definitely trouble me. So I've got to accommodate that. I've got to learn to adjust with that. But if I'm harsh with myself, then what happens is I'm going to get stuck. And this is when disheartenment comes in. This is when I become demotivated. No, I definitely can adjust. So even now, I have to adjust myself to the lighting to this, because I suffer from dry eyes. But I have to do it. There's no other way. Now, I'd love if this was done in the open air, breeze was blowing in my face. But hey, you can't always get what you want. This is what I've been given, so I have to mold myself to the situation. This is the power to adjust. The next power is the power to discern. This is the jeweler who knows the difference between right and wrong, who knows the difference between what is a real diamond and a false diamond, a flawless diamond and a flawed diamond. If you showed me, I wouldn't know if it's a flawed diamond or a flawless. So this is really the ability to discern, the ability to analyze information, the ability to assess. Now, we're constantly bombarded with information. People are trying to manipulate us because they want to see everything from their point of view. Then it could be that people are telling me things that are not true. All I hear a lot these days is fake news. So how do I know whether it's fake or not? Well, this is where the power of discernment comes in. And this has really helped me. It's helped me from almost getting caught up in a scam. I once wanted to buy a van for my work, because I'm in the building trade. And there was this really good van. And it was advertised at a very low price. And I thought, wow, yeah, I think I've got a bargain here. And so immediately I made an offer. They accepted my offer. And they said, well, okay, look, since we've advertised, I've moved from London. I've moved to this Isle of Man. So the alarm bell started to ring. I didn't like that. And couldn't produce the documents. And there were so many alarm bells ringing, I started to actually check everything out. And here my power of discernment was really effective. I was very quickly, within a matter of hours, was to pay up front, and then they would ship the van over. Well, all the information that was given just didn't check out. And I realized this is too good to be true. Too good to be true. You know what they say, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. So let it go. So immediately I told this person, once I realized it was a scam, I says, you are a scammer, and you shouldn't be on there, and you shouldn't fraud people with this type of behavior. And I know it had some positive effect, because it was removed from the eBay site, and because if they hadn't done so, I would have reported it, because I don't want other people to become victims. So the power of discernment is to know the difference between truth and false, right and wrong. So as a manager, I was constantly getting information, and I needed to analyze. And at the end of the day, I always had to realize what was relevant, what was irrelevant, and then accordingly, I made the decisions. So sometimes we do get people that come to us, and they're very angry, for example, and they suddenly offload that was troubling them. And then suddenly we become almost like a victim of their anger. Now, they will accuse us of many things. So here, the power of discernment is very useful. Because at that time, they will be saying things that are relevant, but they will also be saying things that are irrelevant. And when I have this awareness that what's relevant to me and what it is irrelevant, I will disregard that. And I will just focus on the things that are important to me, that apply to me. So this way, I'm very focused on what is being said about me, and not about what they've also carried on from at home or situations or from other people. So I'm definitely not going to become a victim of that. So when I'm using this power of discernment, I recognize that I have the ability to discern what's right and what is wrong. Now, the power of discernment is something that we all have to develop ourselves. I couldn't tell you what's right or wrong. Only you know that. But what's helped me is my gut feeling. It's that inner voice, that conscience sometimes intervenes. And I definitely listen to that. So this power to discern allows me to cope with what is real and what is false. Because in today's world, there is so much that's just an illusion. And when we look below the surface, we realize all is not what it seems. The next one is the power to judge. This is the weighing scale. This is the scale of justice. This is really my decision-making skills. And like the scale, I need to be very balanced in everything that I do. Because sometimes, if we have an idea and we have a desire, we get driven by that desire. And what happens, that becomes the main driver on how we make our decisions, because it's my own desire that I want to accomplish, not realizing that actually it's probably not the best thing. But because it's mine, because I'm attached to it, it will definitely cloud my power to judge, this power to decide. So in life, we need to have a very balanced approach. We can't allow emotions to come into when we make decisions, because all the day, all the time, we are constantly making decisions. Right now, I have to make a decision about airlines. I booked a group for about 12 people, but the flights were cancelled, not through our fault, but because of the situation. And at first, the customer services, the agency that actually booked the tickets, denied all responsibility. They said we were a no-show, but we explained the mitigating circumstances. And so eventually we decided just to wait. Patience was the name of the game. This is that tolerance. This is that power of adjustment being played out. And eventually they said, well, we can offer you a voucher. So again, I said, no, we don't want a voucher, because some people may not have the ability to travel again. And who knows what the future holds. It's possible that the airline may fold as well. So at the moment, we are at that situation. I'm still holding out for a refund. But hey, at least we've got a fallback situation on the voucher. So at this moment in time, I'm using that power to judge. I'm deciding, is this the right thing to do? Because here my power of discernment is working hand in hand with the power to judge. So I'm analyzing information, and I'm emotionally detaching myself from that. It's easy to get caught up in a moment, and we get carried away with our own passion. This is why there's a word in English that's used, let's look at things objectively, which means without any emotion, personal emotions in it. But what happens, most people look at things subjectively, where they get passionate about things And when you get passion involved at that level, it can actually make us taking the wrong course of action. So it's very important that we have a balanced approach. And when we're balanced, we tend to look at both for and against. So we will analyze both sides. This is the ability where at a moment I'm assessing things, and then accordingly I'm making the right decision. This will save myself heaps of problems that could arise if I tend to have a knee-jerk reaction, say, well, okay, let's take the voucher, come what may. But once we've committed, we can't go back, you see. So this is why I'm holding out at the moment. At the moment, patience is needed. So my judgment power is sit tight and wait. So think about things where you are stuck, where you have to make a decision. Is time dictating to you, or are you detached? Are you emotionally withdrawn from that, like that power to withdraw? Look at it from a different perspective, and what happens is you will see things that you never saw before. Now, I'm in the building trade, and one of the things that I do is I always advise my client. I says, these plans are great, but sit and come back to them again in 24 hours. Look at them with a fresh pair of eyes, meaning you'll see things that you probably wouldn't see now. And already on a project that we're working on, because they have been able to walk away and disconnect passionately from what they thought they wanted, then when you talk them with reason, they realize actually it doesn't work. So what has happened is, by communicating with them, by keeping them informed in the loop, they're able to make the right choices, the right decision. So this power to judge happens when we're withdrawn from any emotions. So in my life, I have a balanced approach to life. Whilst I meditate in the early hours of the morning, but I equally also go to bed early. So yes, I'm an early riser, but I also go to bed early. So there's the balance. Then I also go to work. I have a balance in my work as well. So I'm not rushing more in my work, and my work is consuming my whole time and energy. No, come a particular time, I switch off. I don't think about work until the next day. And because I'm switched off when the work finishes, I'm able to see things very clearly. And this has been a wonderful tool in my life. And if you were to use this on a regular basis on that scenario, then what happens is, the chances are you'll make the right decision every time. So the power to judge is a balanced approach. So whatever you do, make sure there's balance in your life as well. Not more to this, more to that. Just have a sort of middle-of-the-road approach. So the next power is the power to face. This is our courage. So here we have the image of a dead body being carried. So that's what they do. As I said, if you've been to India, because these are all Indian images, they do literally have a body wrapped in white sheeting, and they're carrying it by people to the funeral pyre. It's amazing. But sometimes it's very difficult to face death. It's very difficult to face situations because, again, in my own personal experiences, I found it very difficult to have courage in certain situations, especially when our family business folded. And the person that really created a lot of fear in me, where I really lacked courage, was the postman. Because every time the postman came to the building where we worked at, I always thought he was going to bring bad news. So he would post a letter, and if it was a brown letter, I didn't want to touch it. If it was a brown envelope, I didn't want to touch it, because I knew it was from the Inland Revenue or the Customs Excise, and it was going to be bad. So what happens? Because I didn't have the power to face, I didn't have courage, I would just sit tight. I would just wait and wait and wait. And what happened? Eventually, you have to open it. In the meantime, I have gone through turbulence in my mind, causing myself unnecessary distress when all the letter was just to say, well, is there been any change in the situation? So in life also, we sometimes avoid people, we avoid situations because they remind us of something that we're afraid to address. Sometimes we don't want to make decisions because we're afraid of the consequences. We're hoping that others will make the decision for us, or the situation will go away, or this person will automatically leave. Well, the best approach is definitely to become fearless. Now, courage is just a feeling that I need to have. And it's when I lose my own confidence. So when I have this power to face, it's definitely when I have belief in the self. It's when I feel confident. I'm not looking at my past. I'm looking at here I am. This is who I am. I have the confidence, the ability to make the right decision. And when I have courage, often I will save myself a lot of aggravation. Because when I have the courage, I can address things quickly. When it's time to speak, it's time to speak. Especially when we're in a meeting, for example. Especially when we're in a difficult relationship. It's time to share what you're really sharing. Honesty, clarity, transparency are qualities that we need at that time. And when I have that courage, then I'm also expressing what I'm feeling. So if I feel uncomfortable in the situation, I lack the courage, then I've got no one to blame but myself. So we will be presented with opportunities to speak. And when we speak, we should speak with authority, but with humility. It doesn't mean I have to speak aggressively. I just need to express what I'm feeling inside. So in a meeting, is a simple example. If there's something that you disagree with, then say so. Don't be afraid. Don't be ridiculed, because our ego comes in and it creates, an illusion, thinking, I'm going to look silly in front of everyone else. No, the chances are others are probably thinking about the same thing that you are. And I love people who are new to an organization, because you know why? They ask the most simplest of questions. And those simple questions are the very questions that more experienced people who've had a bit more longevity at the organization are afraid to talk about. So sometimes it's just an outsider that says, have you ever thought about this? And then suddenly think, wow, why didn't I say that? Because I was afraid to speak my mind. I was afraid to share my ideas. So when I've conquered this ego, I can definitely show my fearless side. So when at that decision I've expressed my opinions, and if no one else accepts it, that's fine. Accept it, accept the decision, and then move on. So this is where I need that power to pack up again. The final one is the power to cooperate. I suppose in many ways it reflects all of those powers put together. Because the power of cooperation is when I can set aside my own ego, I can tolerate, I can mold myself, I can discern, and I can realize that this is the best for everyone and everything. So in this picture, it's shown that when everyone gives their finger of cooperation, the impossible becomes possible. You can shift mountains. But if I don't have the power to cooperate, it means I'm very much my way or the highway type approach. So when I can cooperate, it means that I'm using all of those other powers in my life. So think about sometimes at home, at work. Are we cooperating with others? Or do we disengage? Do we isolate them, or we isolate ourselves? Well, that is definitely because my own ego is being crushed, and I don't like my ego to be crushed. And you know what happens with ego? It always has to take a guard. It always has to take a position. And one of that position means that I don't want to work with anyone. Hey, does it really matter? Let it go. Put aside your indifferences. put aside of any things that's happened in the past. Work for the good of everyone and everything. So I know in this organization, we've had to do many a program outside. But for the small army of volunteers, things wouldn't have happened. It's because we cooperate. We all recognize that everyone is contributing, no matter how small or big their part is. Even the most tiniest part is important, because without that, this event wouldn't have happened. So we would have to put the seats out. We'd have to put the sound out, sound equipment. We'd have to decorate the stage. And then at the end of the day, we'd have to tidy up, put all the chairs back, remove everything. We have to leave the place as we found it, and probably in a better state than we found it. Now that can only happen when we can work together, when we appreciate each one's qualities. It's like the fingers on this hand. Each one has a speciality. Now, if each finger thinks it's more important than the other, think again. But together, there's power. So if you think the small finger is not important, well, try creating a fist without that small finger. It's very difficult, but include it. There's power in unity. So this is a sign of cooperation. So the more we're able to cooperate with everyone, the more we'll feel light and easy. So the more I include these powers in my everyday life, the more peaceful, the more happy I will be. Now, there are these 8 powers. Power to face, power to cooperate, power to withdraw, power to pack up, power to tolerate, power to adjust, power to discern, and power to judge. But if one power is missing, then all the other powers will be useless. But I have to learn to use all powers, but at the right time, in the right way. It's not that I have to use the power of tolerance when I'm being physically abused. No. Use the power of discernment. This is wrong. Use the power of courage, the power to face. Have courage. Make that power to judge. Withdraw. Then cooperate with the services, agencies. Don't be afraid. So you have to use the right power in the right way. But if I use the wrong power in the wrong way, then the outcome of that will be sorrow. So I know when I'm using the right power, I will feel light inside. I will feel easy. I'll feel peaceful. I'll feel happy. So, do you have these 8 powers? Because we all have them. So how do we increase these 8 powers? Well, like the person sitting in the middle of that flower is doing meditation. And we receive that power when we connect with ourselves. When we connect with ourselves, we're able to connect with the divine. It is through that connection of the divine. Remember, the Supreme Soul is a key part of Raj Yoga. It is, in essence, about the connection of the soul and the Supreme Soul. So the more I connect with the divine, the more I take power from the divine. And those powers allows me to experience the virtues. So if I'm peaceless, if I'm angry, it's because there is a power that's missing in my life. Or I'm using the wrong power in the wrong way. So let me use the right power in the right way. So when I connect with myself, I'm a soul, and I connect with the divine, my powers will literally expand and expand and expand. And then I become the embodiment of powers and virtues. Om Shanti. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to connect with the divine once more. And we're going to take power from the divine. So once more, sit very comfortably. Sit relaxed. Just come into the awareness, I am a peaceful soul. I am a tiny star, shining in the center of this forehead. And I connect with the one who is the highest on high. I connect with the Supreme Light, the Supreme Father, the Supreme Soul. I am just like him, a tiny star. He fills me with all his love, his virtues, his powers. He makes me powerful, makes me courageous, makes me fearless. He makes me realize I too am a master ocean of peace, a master ocean of love. And I sit under his canopy of blessings. And through this connection, I become like my Father. His titles of self-respect also belong to me. And I become the embodiment of those titles. I am a powerful soul, a lighthouse that sends out rays of peace. I'm a might house, powerhouse. And through this connection, my powers increase. Powers that allow me to remain peaceful, to remain content. Om Shanti. So those who have been following the sessions will have realized that we start with silence and we finish with silence. That is, we have meditation at the beginning and meditation at the end. And what that does, it allows the soul to absorb the information that's been revealed. It allows to experience that knowledge in a very practical way. So it makes it more meaningful when I'm practicing this meditation. And so whatever we're doing, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, or whether it's out there, any task, if we start with silence, it will already allow us to accomplish that task much faster. So keeping it simple, I keep this awareness, I am a soul, a child of the Supreme. And through that connection, through that remembrance, the soul takes power. It becomes powerful. So the living battery, it starts becoming fully charged. Now in the next session, in session 6, we'll look at the time. We'll look at this world drama cycle. And hopefully we'll have a better understanding why the world is the way it is. So thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in session 6. Om Shanti. Welcome to the Brahma Kumaris Raj Yoga meditation course. Session 6, the world drama cycle. So as usual, we will start with a moment's silence. So sit very comfortably, sit relaxed. Just 1 second, come into the awareness. I am a point of light. I, the soul, am the actor, wearing this costume, the body. I'm the driver of this vehicle, the body. It is I, the soul, that sees through the windows of the eyes, speaks through this mouth. And I look inwards, and I see the beauty of the soul, a being of peace, a being of truth. And I am a soul who is a child of the divine, the Supreme Father, the Supreme Soul. And I sit under his canopy of love and protection. And I feel light, no burdens of the past, no expectations, just in the consciousness, I am a peaceful soul. Om Shanti. In this session, we'll look at the aspect of time. This is another key lesson of Raj Yoga. We need to understand how time works, why the world is the way it is. So how do we see time? Is it linear or cyclical? In the West, it's generally held that the world was created from the Big Bang, and after billions of years, we are here today. But in the East, time is seen as cyclical. It's a cycle, rather than a continuous flat line, beginning and an end. But those two lines are joined together to form a circle. In fact, if we look around in life, we will actually see that everything runs in a cycle. The earth goes round the sun, and then it goes round again. It's a cycle. Night turns into day, day turns into night. And even in here, on this world, we can see that in the form of the water cycle. There is the cloud, evaporated water, and then when it solidifies, it comes down in the form of rain, liquid water. And that water perhaps comes down a stream, on a mountain, and as this journey begins, this stream is clean and pure. It soon starts becoming cloudy. It starts acquiring impurities from the external, and eventually the cloud is empty, but the river has now become slow, dirty, big. And then eventually it comes to the ocean, and then what happens is that the water evaporates once again. But in order to make it a cycle, it is the intervention of the sun that makes it a cycle. And when the sun intervenes, two things happen. One is that the water that was clean to begin with and became impure is then purified. There is a condensation that takes place. The water evaporates. And the impurity is separated from the water. The impurity remains down and the water goes up. And then the cycle begins. And that is the water cycle. In the same way, like the water cycle, the soul also goes through a cycle of time. So if you can imagine the cloud has the soul world, which we covered in session 4, if we can see the cloud as the soul world, where the soul is in its pristine condition, pure, completely full, no karmic accounts, just completely peaceful. And it comes down into this cycle of time, into this cycle of birth and rebirth. And when it first comes into the cycle, it is pure, elevated. And because there's no karma to be settled, it will only express what's already within the soul: love, peace, happiness, joy, contentment, truth, wisdom. But what happens as it comes into this physical world, it is bound by the laws of physics. And so gradually it will start losing its purity. That is, it will start slowly losing its awareness that it is a soul. And it will reach a point when it loses so much power that one day it thinks it is the body, not realizing it is a soul in a body. When it had power, it knew that it was a soul in a body. But now that power is gone, it has become body conscious. Where once the soul was soul conscious, it has now assumed the identity of the body: religion, nationality, profession, talents, occupation, wealth. And not only it becomes body conscious, it starts becoming influenced by the vices. And as the soul's power diminishes, the vices increase. So the soul starts to experience more and more negativity in its life. And because it's influenced by the vices, it becomes influenced by negative karma. And so those negative karma has to be settled, and so suffering increases. Until eventually all the souls have joined this cycle of time. And like the water cycle, there comes a point when the water has to go back and become a cloud again. In the same way, there comes a point in this cycle when all souls all have to go back home, to the home of silence. But because they came down pure, they will also have to go back pure. So any impurity, any trace of vices will have to be settled, have to be removed in the physical world. So how does that happen? Like in the water cycle, we saw the sun intervening. Without the intervention of the sun, the water could never evaporate and there would be no more cycle. In the same way, here in this world drama cycle, we have the intervention of God. It is God's intervention that makes the soul that was once pure, pure again. And through that intervention, the whole world, the whole of matter becomes cleansed as well. And so the world that was once beautiful, that became ugly, becomes beautiful again. So this is the cycle of time. So let's look at it in a bit more detail. So if we draw this circle and we divide it into 4 equal quarters, each quarter represents an age. So if we start with the top right hand, which is represented by the full tree, the golden color, it represents the golden age. And like gold, pure gold, it is free from any oxidization, meaning it never rusts. And pure gold is very flexible. Pure gold is very valuable. Then we move into the next age, which represents the silver age. Still a precious age, but not as valuable as the golden age. And then from the silver age, we move into the copper age. Each age is now going lower than the age before. Each time that the cycle of time moves, it's becoming more and more degraded. And so from the copper age, we move into the final quarter, which is the iron age. Iron age is a metal that rusts very easily. And whereas at the beginning, it was the golden age, where the soul was uninfluenced by the external. By the end, in the iron age, like the iron, it rusts very quickly. That is, the soul is covered by the rust of the vices. But right at the end, there is this little white period. There's this little section, and that it represents the diamond age or the confluence age. The word confluence means a meeting. So here it is the meeting place between the two ages, the golden age and the iron age. It is in this age that God intervenes directly, makes the soul pure, and because the soul becomes pure, matter will also become pure. And so the new world is created. So what God does is not that he creates a world out of nothing. This world has always existed. Matter has always existed, but what God does, he rejuvenates the old world. He makes the impure world pure again. That is, he changes a world that was once heaven, that changed into hell, he changes it back into heaven again. So heaven represents the highest point in the cycle, and hell represents the lowest. It's not a world that heaven is up there and hell is down below. It just represents the opposite end of the cycle. So the cycle is eternal. It has no beginning, it has no end. So God comes every cycle, makes the world pure again, and then becomes redundant. For half the cycle, golden and silver age, God has nothing to do because everyone is happy, everyone is soul conscious. This is what people will remember as heaven. This is the Garden of Eden. This is the Garden of Allah. This is Swarg. And then, in the beginning of the Copper Age, when the soul has become body conscious, not only does it become body conscious, it becomes God conscious. We remember a being that we call God, and we build temples. We have unadulterated worship of the one God, but that soon becomes adulterated. And not only do we worship God in many different forms, we also start worshipping human beings of the Golden Age, not realizing we're actually worshipping our own former selves. And we remember these in the forms of gods and goddesses or deities. So in the Copper Age, God also becomes aware. He also has consciousness. And his role is very simply just to fulfill the desires of the devotees. So in the Copper Age, we have new religions. In the Copper Age, we have body consciousness. And body consciousness leads to duality. And duality leads to conflict because there's difference of opinions. Because the soul is now trapped in the identity of the outside. It is looking for happiness from the outside, not realizing that it came from a world where it had everything because at that time it was soul conscious. So in the Copper Age, we have new religions that begin. We have Abraham, starts the religion of Judaism. We have Buddha, who establishes the Buddhist religion. Then we have Christ, who establishes the Christian religion. Then later we have Muhammad, who starts the religion of Islam. So in the Copper Age, there is a proliferation of different religions, of different cultures, of different languages, because the soul that was once the master of matter has now become subservient to matter. And then it moves from the Copper Age to the Iron Age, to the lowest point when the soul has become so degraded, where once it was so elevated. It's represented by the barren tree. The tree has now in a stage of degradation, a stage of decay. Ultimately, night has to turn to day. And no time can stop that. So God also then plays his greatest role. It is what he does here in this confluence age that is then remembered on the path of devotion, and he is known as the Creator. And once God's role is finished, he takes all the souls back, and then he too becomes redundant, and then the drama begins again. So the drama is eternal. It is imperishable. Every soul will have to play a part in this cycle. No one is exempt from this. Even God is not exempt. So, when the soul is full, let's go back to the beginning. When the soul is full, each soul will come according to its capacity. Even though the souls are pure in the soul world, everyone's capacity is unique. No two souls' capacity are the same. For example, if we have containers and each has different capacity, one has 1 litre capacity, 2 litres, 3, 4, 5, so on to, say, a maximum of 100. Then once you've reached the limit of 1 litre, that container cannot hold any more. It has reached its capacity. But in relation to a 2 litre, it only has half the capacity. So once a 2 litre has reached its capacity, it cannot hold any more. So both containers are full, but each is different in capacity. In the same way, every soul in the soul world, although they are the same size, their internal capacity of purity is number-wise. That is important because that will determine when the soul will come down into the cycle of time. So the ones who come down first are the ones whose capacity is the highest. So they are the ones who will come down to begin the cycle of birth and rebirth. So when they first come down, and I have to mention that at no times is this world ever empty of human beings. So there's always a transfer from the old to the new. But we'll just look into that at some other time. So when the soul comes down, it is naturally soul conscious. Because the soul is pure, matter is also pure. Because ultimately, matter is just a reflection of the purity or the impurity of the soul. And because the soul is pure, the matter it's in its most pristine condition. So the body doesn't decay like it does today. So the lifespan of the body will have a long lifespan. It will have a fixed lifespan. It won't die of any illness. There'll be no accidents. So we live in a world in the golden age where there's no difference of opinions. It's just one world. You won't need a passport to go from one area to another. Everyone is soul conscious, but not God conscious. We don't call out to God because we're full. We don't need to acquire knowledge of what's up above the sky or what's down below ground. They are just living in the moment. They are non-judgmental. They live in harmony. Even the animals are in harmony. This is the age when truly it is remembered as the lamb and the lion drank water together. Because even the animals are soul conscious. So this is a world that is an abundance of everything that is pure, that's elevated. And these are human beings with divine qualities which will be remembered as deities. So this is the kingdom that God creates. And when the lifespan finishes, the soul is aware that it's going to take a new birth. And each time it takes a new birth, the lifespan of the body will decrease because the purity of the soul is decreasing, because it's following the law of entropy. But as the soul that came at the beginning has started its journey of cycle of birth and rebirth, other souls will also join. So maybe the soul that came at the beginning, it's their second birth, but the one soul that's just come down now will be their first birth. So in the same way, the population of the world is gradually increasing. So from the golden age, we move into the silver age. It is still a world of happiness, but there's less of. It's still happy, but it is almost like the sparkle has reduced. There's plenty of resources for everyone. So everything is still in abundance. There's no sense of I'm missing out on anything. So the golden age represents heaven. The silver age is like semi-heaven. So this represents when we are naturally soul conscious. And then from the golden, which gives way to the silver age, will eventually give way to the copper age. It is when we become body conscious that the copper age begins. Where once the soul had the awareness it is a soul in a body, the soul then thinks it is the body. It's rather like the car thinks it's driving the driver, but the driver has forgotten that actually it drives the car. It's not the tail that wags the dog, it's the dog that wags the tail. It is always important to remember it's always the soul that has a body and not a body that has a soul. So in the body conscious world in the Copper Age, we become God conscious and we search for God. But because we don't know who we are, we become further and further away from the truth. That is, we lose the awareness of what is God consciousness in the sense that as he is and what he is. And not only do we become God conscious, new religions begin, new cultures begin, new languages begin. And it's almost like there are divisions. And as time progresses, these divisions will increase. So even religions, they bring a message appropriate to that time in the cycle. So Abraham brings the aspect of not to worship any idols, live by godly rules. Buddha brings the aspect of karma, that we're all responsible for our actions. Christ brings the aspect of love, because by this time some had seen God as an angry God. Islam brings the aspect that you shouldn't worship anything physical. This is why if you go into a mosque, you will only find writings of the Quran on the roof, but nothing else. So each religion brings a message, and each religion is good. Each religion teaches good things. But as time progresses, because the soul is becoming more and more degraded, its intellect, the power to understand, the power to reason, also degrades. And eventually, something that's very subtle becomes very gross. So we start becoming more fundamental in our approach to religion. It's the way we dress, the rituals that we perform, but we forget the original message of each messenger that came to establish that religion. And not only do countries divide, religions divide, everything divides. Everything has to reach its point of degradation. And so in the Copper Age, we become karma conscious. Everything is dependent on our actions, and we receive the return of those actions. Whereas in the Golden and Silver Ages, actions are neutral because no one is creating any karma with each other, because no one needs anything, because everybody's full. But in the Copper Age, karma is definitely the prevailing factor of how we feel. But the population of the world is always increasing because the souls are constantly coming down from the soul world. So some have been here from the beginning, but the soul has just come now at the end of the Copper Age. For them, it's like happiness. They've got no karmic accounts. They are just full according to their capacity. For them, it is like heaven on earth. But they too will eventually degrade. And so the process continues. As time continues, every soul will continue to take birth and rebirth, and new souls will continue to join this marathon of birth and rebirth. And everyone will reach its lowest point according to their capacity. So in the Iron Age, sometimes referred to in Hindi as Kali Yuga, the age of death, it is when the soul becomes extremely body conscious, more influenced by the vices than ever before. And because of becoming influenced by the vices, karma becomes more and more degraded. It becomes more and more negative. And according to the law of karma, all karmic accounts have to be settled. So the suffering increases. And as the suffering increases, the soul's power of purity diminishes even further. So it's in a downward slippery slope of constantly performing more and more negative karma. And we can see that in today's world, where suffering has increased exponentially, where we've abused nature, we abuse other human beings, we have abused other forms of life on this earth. So inevitably, this life is not sustainable. But we've left one key element out of this, and that is God. And what God does is that when the world has reached its lowest point, he has to intervene. Because he has to make the world pure again, and only he can do that. Because he's outside of the cycle of birth and rebirth, he's the only one that can change the law of entropy. Even scientists admit that law of entropy can be changed, but we don't have the power to do it. But only God does it because he's outside. And because he's outside the laws of change, he never becomes body conscious. Therefore, he can make the soul pure again. And so he takes all souls back to their eternal awareness, their original awareness of a pure soul. So he liberates every soul, irrespective of whether the soul wants to be liberated or not, irrespective of what religion the soul follows. So everyone will be liberated. And then the cycle repeats again. And it has no beginning, it has no end. So let's look at the drama once more. So each soul is an actor. Everyone's part is fixed. No two souls' part is repeated. Every time the soul takes rebirth, it will have a new costume, a new body. And whatever samskaras it's created, whatever karmic accounts it's created, it will carry forward into its next birth. So the cycle is eternal, meaning no one has created this cycle. Not even God can say, well, I created this. It's always existed. And it's predestined. Everything that happens in a cycle will happen again. Because what God does, a universe that's expanded, he will bring back to the starting point again, when entropy is at its lowest point. That is, when the world is pure once again. And then he has nothing to do, and then the world will follow that course of action. So a world that has happiness will end up in sorrow. A world that was heaven will become hell. So this can now be looked in a slightly different way. And this is the Kalpa tree, or the tree of religions. So it's the cycle, but in a bit more detail. So the seed is at the bottom. Now, like a physical tree, it starts with a seed. And from the seed are the roots. The roots are always underground. They're always establishing the future sapling of the tree. And when the roots have been established, the trunk emerges. And then eventually, the trunk will have branches. At first, there's one branch, and then that branch will subdivide into sub-branches, and they too will continue to divide. And new branches will emerge. And eventually, the tree becomes no longer sustainable, and the tree will die. But before the tree dies, it always leaves a seed, so the new tree can continue, so its creation continues. But this is the tree of religions. Here the seed is God. God establishes the new world on the basis of purity, basis of truth, basis of virtues. So the roots represent his helpers. So these are the souls whose capacity is as great as it can possibly be, but not as great as God. And they are the ones who will rule the future new world. So the trunk represents oneness. So we have the lower half, which is the golden age, and then the upper half of the trunk is the silver age. So this is that unity. But eventually, the trunk will disappear. That is, the golden and silver age will disappear. And new branches will emerge. The branch of Abraham, the branch of Shankaracharya, the branch of Buddha, the branch of Christ, the branch of Islam, the branch of Guru Nanak. Now, all of these branches follow the same business model, you could say. That they start off in harmony, there's unity. They will also go through their golden and silver age. And then eventually, they will also have a duality. That is, they will hit their equivalent of the copper age. And when the copper age comes, that religion will divide. There will be a difference of opinions. So you can follow any religion and you will see that it follows this particular path of unity and then disunity and then more disunity. And eventually, each of these branches will be divided into cults, isms, little twiglets, each one holding on to what they consider to be the truth, not realizing that they belong to the trunk, not realizing they belong to the tree of the variety of religions. So eventually, the tree is unsustainable. Now, give you an example. I've been raised here in the West, so I understand the Christian religion probably better than all the other religions. Now, for a religion that's about 2,000 years, I would say for 1,000 years, it was a united religion where its headquarters was in Rome. But then about 1,000 years ago, it experiences schism. The Great Schism, as it's known as. And that was the split. So you have a new headquarters, a second headquarters in Constantinople, which is now known as Istanbul. So we have the Catholics and we have the Orthodox. And as time progresses, these religions themselves will divide even more. And to this day, they're still dividing. So I don't know how many branches there are in Christianity, but I read somewhere there were over 40,000. Now, the one thing they don't do is in that particular branch is they say, I'm a Christian. They will identify with that little cult, that little ism that they belong to. So it's a Methodist religion, a Baptist religion, a Presbyterian religion. But they don't say, I'm a Christian. But if you're looking from another branch, you will always see them as Christians. Just as if the Christians look at the branch of Islam, they will all see everybody as Muslims. So, but if you're in the Muslims, you will always see yourself according to whichever sect of the branch you belong to, Sunni or Shia, for example. So this tree is not sustainable when it's constantly dividing. And then, right at the end, God comes once more in that confluence age, that little white period, where the soul has to be made pure again, and God creates a new world. Now think about this. Why would God create another religion on top of another religion on top of another religion that only causes conflict? Surely God would only create one religion, and a religion in that sense that it's just a world that is united, a way of life that is very pure and elevated. That is God's kingdom. So, God has to intervene. I have some interesting questions for you. Now, if you accept this cycle of time, you realize the Iron Age, that is hell, has to give way to the Golden Age, which is heaven. But we on our own cannot change this world because we're also becoming more and more degraded. How can someone who is impure make another one who is impure pure? How can someone who's dirty make someone who's dirty clean? No one. Only God can do that. And so God has to intervene. So the question is, how does God intervene in this cycle if he doesn't come into the cycle of birth and rebirth? Second question, if God intervened in this cycle, who would know that this is God? Because we do live in a world where many keep claiming themselves to be God. And if God came, because he's not omnipresent, then which country would he come in? And the final question is, when would he come? When would God intervene? Now, before we answer those questions, I want to ask you another question. Which age in the cycle are we in? So if I go back to the picture of the cycle. So in this cycle, the world drama cycle, which age do you think we're in? Are we in the Golden Age? No. Silver Age? No. Copper Age? No. Iron Age? Yes. This is hell. This is living hell. Ask someone who is suffering from an illness that cannot be cured. Is it heaven or hell? They will say hell. If you've been a victim of crime, is it heaven or hell? It's hell. This is the Iron Age. Next question. You and I have also come into this cycle of birth and rebirth at some point. Now, don't look at our present birth, because we know this is not the best birth. But when did we first come into the cycle? At some point, we must have also come into the cycle. Was it just now? Was it in the Copper Age? Was it in the Silver Age or the Golden Age? Because when we came down, we were at our most elevated. The soul would have been pure, the body would also have been pure. So when was that first birth? So which age did you first come? I'm going to tell you, it is most likely that you either came in the Silver Age or most probably in the Golden Age. Why? Because you're listening to this. Because it's already recorded in your sanskars. Because it's in your sanskars, what I'm saying is starting to make sense. You may not have clarity. There may be questions of clarifications, but some of this is starting to make sense. Now, I know elements of this knowledge you may find out there, but not to this degree, not to this depth. So you are most likely a golden aged soul. That makes you very special. Do you feel special? Well, you are special. So how does God intervene then? The problem is, he doesn't have his own body. Now, let's suppose you know how to drive a car. You have your own car. That's fine. But what if you could drive a car, but you don't want to own a car, but you still want that independence? You know what you can do? You can hire a vehicle. In the same way, God has to take a body on loan. Just as you hire a vehicle, when you finish with it, what do? You give it back. You never have the consciousness, this is my car. In the same way, God takes a body on loan, but he never has the awareness, this is my body. It's not that he evicts the owner of that body. No, he sits next to that soul. So there would be two souls sitting at that time, and one would be the one who owns the body, and the other one would be God. Because remember, God is just a point of light. God cannot be seen, cannot be touched. You cannot photograph God. You can only realize God. So God would come into this world by borrowing a particular body. Which one? Well, again, you need to understand the cycle. It would have to be the body of the soul that first came into the cycle of birth and rebirth. Because that soul has experienced the whole of the cycle. That soul will have searched for God more than any other soul. So the body that God comes into would be the soul who would now be in their last birth. The soul that first came into the cycle of birth and rebirth, who would now be in their last birth. It is that body that God would take on loan. Next question. Who would recognize God? Well, those who've just come down. You can tell these new souls, celebrities, they're very famous in what they do, they're very successful. These are normally the signs of a new soul. But they're not searching for God. They're not searching for the truth. The ones who've searched for God more than anyone else are the souls who first came down in the cycle of birth and rebirth. So the ones who would recognize God first are those first few souls. And then as they recognize God, then gradually all the other souls that eventually come down into the cycle of birth and rebirth will all recognize God. Now, not every soul will take birth and rebirth. They will only take one birth. The majority of souls do not take rebirth. They only come at the end. And we know that from the population census. We can see that presently we're almost 8 billion. And yet, in 1900, the world population was 2 billion. In 1800, it was 1 billion. So if it's doubled in 100 years, how long did it take to get to 1 billion? A long time. And then in the space of 100 years, it's doubled. And then in the space of less than 120 years, it's quadrupled. So that implies a lot of souls have come down. But because their capacity is low, they're going to degrade quite rapidly. But the ones who came at the beginning, their capacity is so immense, they are the ones who will recognize God first. And in a particular scripture, in the Hindu scripture known as the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, there's a famous chapter, there's a famous verse that says, when there's unrighteousness, when there's irreligiousness, I come. But when I come, only a handful out of multi-millions will recognize me, and even then, only a few out of a handful will recognize me as I am what I am. So the ones who would recognize, it's those who come at the beginning. Now, where would God come? Again, we need to understand the cycle. If God creates a world that is united, that is heaven on earth, then that will be the original land. And by going through the cycle of time, that land would have had the most time to experience the greatest explosion in terms of population, ideas. It would have been the most in terms of where religions have taken a hold but have become more and more divided. Now, if you look at history, there is one direction that you will go, and that is east. And that east, you will, if you keep going, you will end up in a country called India. India is not its real name. Its real name is Bharat. So God comes into the land that he first creates, that has now become the oldest and the most degraded land, the poorest of all lands. It is in that country that God comes. And that is where he comes. He comes in Bharat, or India. The India that we know today is not the India that was even a few hundred years ago. Even before the British came, it was a very wealthy country, but much bigger. And we know that from the temples that were built in Southeast Asia. So the religion that was of the Golden and Silver Age then became known as the Hindu religion. And Hinduism expanded to Southeast Asia, to the Middle East even, but then contracted as new religions started to emerge. So God comes in India. And when? Well, when is when the confluence age begins. When the confluence age begins, God intervenes. I have a question for you. Where do you think this knowledge has come from? You won't find it in the scriptures. No one's going to say the soul is a point of light. No one's going to say the soul is mind, intellect, and scars. No one's going to say the soul remains in its own species. No one says that God is a point of light, that God lives in a world beyond silence, that this is a cycle of time. And I won't go into the data of the cycle of time, but just keep it simple. Where has this knowledge come from? Well, it certainly hasn't come from another human being. It has come from the Almighty Authority himself. So what does that mean? It means, the last question, when would God come? God could only give his own introduction. I could not give God's introduction. This knowledge has come from God himself. So, God himself has intervened directly into this drama. Yes, I will repeat it again. God has come directly and intervened in this drama. He has come once again to make the world pure again. Now, as a leap of faith, you have to decide if that is the right answer, if this makes sense, if this truly is God's knowledge. Well, I can't convince you. You have to make that decision yourself. However, we will help you. Your experience will help you. So the Raj Yoga has covered the aspect of the identity of the self, how the soul functions, mind, intellect, sanskars. We looked at the philosophy of karma, that each soul is responsible for their own actions and every account has to be settled. That there is a God and he is just one, and he remains outside of the cycle of birth and rebirth, and he's just a point of light. And that he gives us powers and attainments and knowledge, and we can use those powers to experience the virtues of the soul. And then we looked at the aspect of time. Time is actually cyclical, that we all come down to play our part. The whole purpose of the soul is to express and experience, but he can only do that once in a physical body. And then we looked that God himself has to intervene. And finally, we revealed to you that God has come. And he's revealed the beginning, the middle, and the end of this cycle. And he introduces himself and says, "My name is Shiva. And you remembered me in the form of Shivlingam. And the reason why you experience so much sorrow is that you've forgotten that you're a soul. Now, remember that you're a soul, and remember me, your father. And through my remembrance, your sins will be cut away." That's his main message. And that's what Raj Yoga is all about. So let's finish this session with some meditation. So once again, sit very comfortably, sit relaxed. Just come into the awareness, I am a point of light. I am a tiny star sitting in the center of this forehead, a peaceful soul. And I belong to the one who is my one true beloved, who is the one who's restored my honor, my dignity, my self-respect. I belong to the one who is my support, my strength. I belong to the one who gives me his canopy of protection, his canopy of blessings. And I remember the divine, the Supreme Father, the Father of all souls, the Supreme Soul. He has come once again to give me my inheritance of happiness, purity, wealth. He has come to make the world pure once more. He has come to take me back home, to his home, to my home, to our home. I just remind myself of who I am. A peaceful soul, a tiny soul, a point of light. Om Shanti. If you would like to receive further information, we are giving you this contact points. We run classes on the internet, or they're available at your local centre when the centres reopen. Or you can email us for further information. You can email Leicester at uk.brahmakumaris.org, or you can visit our website, brahmakumaris.org, and from there you can find your local centre in your local country. And the Brahma Kumaris are now in over 130 countries with over 9,000 centres. And the message is slowly but expanding and accelerating that God has come. And I do hope you have an open mind and you let go and you connect with the divine and experience its wonderful nature, its very gentle and loving nature. The God that I know is the God that everyone will accept. He only has love, only has truth, only has compassion. He is the one who is ever pure, ever peaceful, ever knowledgeful. Om Shanti.